We are Heather and Paul Christie.
And for over 12 years, we've worked with executives and entrepreneurs to accelerate change in every aspect of their business.
Because we are in the fastest paced business environment that anyone has ever seen before.
So join us for the Evolve to Win show.
Hey, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Evolve to Win with Heather and Paul. I'm flying solo today as Paul is off traveling, and I want to share with you in this episode a specific aspect of emotional intelligence, and it is this. Have you ever gotten into a state of emotion where you have said something or done something that you wish you could take back and undo or unsay? So if you've ever been there, I want to help you understand what happens physiologically that actually brings you to that state and help you come up with some strategies for how to manage that a little bit better. This is helpful for you whether you're the one who loses emotional control at times, or if you have somebody in your world, whether it's somebody you work with, maybe somebody at home that you know does this at times. What I want to do is share an image with you as I go through and talk about our physiological response. So if you happen to be listening to this by audio and you want to see the video, you can go to my website at heatherchristie.com, or you can go to my YouTube channel and search on Heather Christie. And by the way, I'm not the rock star Heather Christie, I'm the other one. Okay. All right. So I'm going to share an image with you as we talk about emotional intelligence. And you should be able to see that right now on your screen. And for those of you who are listening by audio, what I'm sharing here is a view of two different brains. And I'm going to talk about the distinction between a low emotional state and a high emotional state. First thing I want to do is I want to describe for you the definition of emotional intelligence. And the way that we define it is it's the ability to sense, understand, and effectively apply the power and acumen of your emotions and the emotions of others in order to facilitate higher levels of collaboration and productivity. So that's a very technical definition that we use. If we break that down and I were to summarize this in just a couple of different buckets, there are two main buckets that we look at with emotional intelligence. One is self-awareness, the other is awareness of others. In self-awareness, how well do you understand how your emotions show up for other people and the impact that they have on other people, and how well can you regulate that? When it comes to others, how well do you understand someone else's emotional state, and how good are you at managing that relationship? So said another way, if you come across somebody who's in a high emotional state, or if they're in upset, how good are you at helping to bring them back to the present, bring them back to that rational thought? So I want to share with you what happens to us physiologically as we go through a high emotional state. Now, if you look at the image on the left, so you basically see a picture of a brain, and we're showing you the higher cortex. Now, this is the slower emotional center. So it's the slower, more complex prefrontal cortex. It controls our rational thought and our decision making. All right. When we're calm and we're in a relaxed state, we have access to this higher cortex. However, when we go into high emotion, and be thinking about any type of high emotion, doesn't even have to be negative. It could be anger, fear, excitement, love, hate, disgust, frustration. Think of all these different heightened emotions. When you're there, you actually lose access to your higher cortex. It becomes disabled. So it shuts down. And what happens is the amygdala takes over. So if you've ever heard that phrase, an amygdala hijack, literally what happens is your amygdala, which you may know as the fight or flight mechanism, it's your instinctive brain, your instinctual amygdala. That's what takes over, and it's what allows us to react quickly. So essentially what you're doing is you're taking action based on whatever your current emotional state is. So you can already see how scary that can be, right? So the amygdala over the years prehistorically has been essential to our survival. I mean, think about the saber-toothed tiger when it's chasing our ancestors. It's a good thing that amygdala kicked in and they took action and they got out of harm's way. It's not as helpful, however, in the boardroom these days. So if your amygdala has ever taken over, I know mine has, it's not always pretty what happens. So what do you do about it? Well, I was facilitating an exercise this morning with a senior leadership team, and I had them do the following exercise. Step one, determine your triggers. We all have these triggers that will pull us into a high emotional state. Be thinking about, what are those things that frustrate you? What are those things that cause you anxiety or fear? What are the things that anger you? When you actually isolate and identify those triggers that you know will bring you into a high emotional state, you can actually access your higher cortex before you allow that emotional state to take over and disable your higher cortex. So become intimately familiar with your triggers so that you can begin to respond rather than just react. Number two, I want you to be thinking about when one of those triggers hits, think about the things that frustrate you the most. When one of those triggers hits, what is your behavior? And I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, well, my behavior is different depending on the situation, depending on the person. So take any given situation at work. Imagine that you are sitting around the table at one of your regular team meetings. Every one of us has triggers at our team meetings. What are they and what do you do about them? Do you engage? Do you get argumentative? Do you shut down? Do you disengage? So it's really interesting to figure out what you do. And then I want you to do number three, which is determine what is the impact on your team when one of these triggers happens and you go into your emotional state. So I know that many of you are highly emotionally evolved, and you're not necessarily, screaming and yelling when something bad happens, but it's not about that. Emotional intelligence oftentimes is about the ability to control our body language as well as our voice. So it's not always the words that you say. It's not about someone who's lost their mind and they start screaming and yelling. Sometimes it's about the fact that you just show major frustration on your face. Sometimes you disengage, you roll your eyes, or you just disengage with your eyes. Whatever it is that you do, I want you to recognize that there's an impact on those around you when you get frustrated. People see it, people know it, the same way that you see it in other people. So unless you are incredibly highly emotionally intelligent, there's a good chance that your body language is sharing what's going on with you internally. So here's the challenge with that. People know you're frustrated, but if you don't say anything, they don't really know why. They're left to guess. And that's never a good idea, to let people guess at what frustrates you or why. All right, so remember, when you go into this high emotional state, you lose access to your prefrontal cortex. That's your thinking, that's your rational brain. You're acting from your amygdala. That's your reactionary instinctive brain. You take action based on your current dominant emotion. So you've now done number one, figure out what your triggers are. Number two, think about how you behave once those triggers happen. Number three, ask yourself, what's the impact on my team when I behave in that way? The last piece is, so what do you do about it? And the answer is, as soon as you get really clear on what those triggers are, I want you to start really paying attention to, with a much higher level of awareness, what shows up for you and how you behave, and just observe it and be curious about it. That will help to show you how you actually react in these situations. And once you've begun to do that, it's in that awareness that you can begin to make different choices. So come up with a plan. Next time the trigger happens, I want you to imagine a different way of being, a different way of responding. So instead of shutting down, could you re-engage and get curious? Could you start to ask questions about, why is someone saying what they're saying? Why is someone doing what they're doing? And really start to understand if you can figure out what this person is feeling behind the words. So start to explore, start to examine. It's always an awareness that we can actually make a change. And by the way, if you have people around you who need to hear this message, please do share this with them as well. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Evolve to Win. And we are in partnership with Gulf Shore Business Magazine. If you haven't connected with us yet, please go to heatherchristie.com and sign up for our leadership list. Have a great day.